leadership of U.S. Sailing Board and staff, and we're just going to go down the line really quickly. I'll introduce people unless you want to introduce yourselves. You feel like introducing yourselves? All right, we'll have them introduce themselves to you. I have some questions, actually many questions that came in through the registration process, as well as all the questions that you all put up on the easels, and we'll make sure to ask some of those as well. And we'll also make sure to open it up for you all as well. We do have an hour for this session, so I asked you guys if you wanted drinks before. Any takers this time? Okay, they're all good and ready to go. So I'll throw it to Cory and go down the line to introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Josh, for the opportunity. Cory Sertl. I'm the past president of U.S. Sailing. And I'm actually, I kind of note that every one of us is a volunteer around here, and we actually kind of change hats a lot. And my hat, I have a couple other hats I wear I wanted to share with you. Last year, I was elected to the board of World Sailing. And I have another 3 years on that board, and so that's been a really interesting journey for me. So I also spent a lot of time representing U.S. sailing at the world sailing level. So I'm looking forward to that, and I am also on our U.S. Sailing Foundation board moving forward, so really excited to support what we've been working on so hard and in that arena and supporting all the people on the board. So I'm not going away, happily supporting and look forward to this discussion.
Rich Jepsen, brand newly minted president of U.S. Sailing, serving as the chair of the board of directors. My hawspipe was up through public access sailing, ran a commercial sailing school for 34 years, sat as the chair of the training committee for 18 years, and this is my third stint on the board.
Hi everybody, I'm Provancha from San Diego, California. I am the Sailor Athlete elected director on the board. I was a 2016 Olympian in Rio in the 470 class, so that qualified me as a sailor athlete. I sit on a number of committees. I am the board liaison for the DE&I committee. I also sit on the selection committee and am a big part of the Sailor Athlete Council.
Hi, Alan Ostfield again, U.S. Sailing. You heard my background before from Rich, and I won't bore you with it again.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Nosach, and I am the Chief Development Officer for the U.S. Sailing Foundation. So we are the fundraising arm for U.S. Sailing. We raise and invest the funds and then turn them over to the association to be spent appropriately via your donor designation. So I want to thank everyone in the room who volunteers, supports, donates, or in any other way advances the mission of U.S. Sailing. We would be nowhere without you, so thank you for that. I'm also the Vice Commodore of the Jamestown Yacht Club, right here in Jamestown, Rhode Island, and I belong to the Blue Water Sailing Club and to IAC as well.
Paul Cayard, I'm the Executive Director of U.S. Olympic Sailing. I guess in Yacht Club terms, I'm a 46-year member of St. Francis Yacht Club and served as the chairman of the board there for the better part of the last several years. So I have a little yacht club knowledge and general sailing knowledge, as well as my athletic professional side.
So we're going to start off with not a question to any specific person. I'd love to hear each one of your thoughts on this and just go down the line. Probably one sentence or less. Paul, one sentence or less. So in your opinion, what do you believe is U.S. Sailing's greatest asset? We'll start with Cory and go down.
So our passionate people, whether volunteers or staff.
Took mine. I think it's the sport. In addition to the volunteers, it's a very unique sport that does so many different things for people. It's wide-ranging and diverse in terms of the opportunities, and it's something you can do from 8 to 80. So that's a huge asset in terms of building our organization.
Yeah, I think our members, all of you in this room, are what keeps the wheels going for us. So very appreciative for all of you.
Cory stole my answer because she got to go first, but I'll expand on it by saying sports works, activities like this work because you leverage the passion that exists. And whether you love us or don't love us yet, those are passions that can serve all of us well.
Well, since we're at the stakeholder summit, I'm going to go with the most important part are the stakeholders.
I think the most our most important asset is our future.
So this next question, I'm going to point towards Paul and Alan, just in terms of the leadership of the association and team kind of together. The question is, with more investment being made in elite athletes, the U.S. sailing team and the Olympic athletes, what are the expectations, or what do you think the expectations should be, and commitment by those elite sailors to give back to U.S. sailing and aspiring sailors?
I think that, and that's going to be part of one of my chats with the team in January. There's a quid pro quo when you're an elite athlete in any sport, and that is to give back, that is to represent, and it needs to be done in measure, of course, because we're still counting on these athletes to do what they do best and to represent us at the highest levels of competition. But there is room in their lives to go to yacht clubs and talk to the juniors, and actually a little bit what I did at Culver and IMG Academy. I would like to, deploy a small army of our Olympians to go around the country. And really, if we're going to create this movement that's as broad as we want it to be, we do need to ask the athletes, again, when it works, to go out and nurture the next generation and inspire those kids and use their celebrity in our sport anyway to help grow the full pyramid that we need to become what we all want it to be. So there's definitely a role for these athletes.
And I would add that all that's well said. I would add that as we're doing more for them, that's our objective over the coming years. Paul expects more from them for us and for the sailing community. And if you think about the puzzle that was on the board before, they can touch all of those aspects as well. So they're not just raising the next generation of elite athletes. They are using their celebrity, as Paul said, to make a difference in the DEI space, or make a difference in the community sailing space, or just getting people on the water. So I think that they have a large role to play, not just on the elite athlete side, but on the community sailing side.
And Alan, I'm going to continue with you. You mentioned the puzzle pieces that you mentioned in your initial presentation. And we talked about a little bit about the prioritizing of the different constituents and facets of sailing in general. And there's a follow-up question to it of, is U.S. sailing reaching out to current leaders for this insight, or are there plans to reach out to individuals historically underrepresented or unheard within each of those stakeholder communities?
Sure. And this is a piece of the puzzle, what we're doing now. Rich and I went to Chicago a few months ago for listening sessions. Betsy talks about surveys all the time. I spent some time with someone from the Bristol Yacht Club, and we talked about getting together more so we can hear their concerns and how we can better help them. So we won't be better able to serve people until we fully understand what it is people need us to serve them with. And if we think we know it all, and maybe some people think they know a lot, but we don't know it all. I certainly don't know it all. One benefit of being new is I can comfortably say I don't know enough, and I'm really happy to listen so you can teach me. So I think that we as an organization are going to listen more, and all of that will lead to good things. We will do a much better job of serving people when we hear exactly what they need.
Rich, I'm going to change the tide a little bit and go over to you. We had a great panel earlier that went way over time in terms of DEI. It's a great, very important topic. Coming in as president as of today, looking forward in terms of your term, can you let us know a little bit what the importance of DEI in your administration is, what the role you see U.S. Sailing play, and if there's any plans in terms of DEI in your administration?
Thanks. So I'll take the second one first. I see our role as a national organization as one of persuasion and inspiration and creating aspiration for the people who are doing the heavy lifting, which are LSO leaders, yacht clubs, community sailing programs, regional programs, one design class leadership. What's going to move the needle on that issue is that group, and it's my job, our job, to help make that easier for them, inspire them to do it, get them excited about the concept, get them excited about the return on investment that is available there by being more inclusive and more diverse. I think that's our role. In addition, as Betsy was saying, we do involve ourselves in a lot of local efforts to grow diversity at the grassroots level. Just this last, 2 weeks ago, something that started with an idea that I proposed to Paul, who was chairman of the board at St. Francis at the time, to get some kids from a local community sailing program called Treasure Island Sailing Center, get them out on the Club J22s with volunteer coaches, and give them an opportunity to do something that they hadn't gotten to do. They're all RS FIVA sailors from the Siebel Sailor program, and a really diverse bunch. And so we got them out with coaches like Pam Healy and Helena Scott and Paul Heineken and Craig Healy, and then photographed the whole thing. We were talking about our portfolio of photos and how that's slowly growing. Photos of kids with different skin colors in boats, with kids who are white. Integrated sailing, not just diverse sailing, but integrated sailing. And it took a year of planning because of COVID, but we finally pulled it off. We've held sponsored regattas at Hudson River Community Sailing. One's called Sailing for Scholars. I'm trying to remember the other one. Is it Heroes Regatta or? Oh, you have Stonewall, right? Exactly. So there's a bunch of stuff we're doing in partnership with local programs that we'll continue to do, and we'll ramp up as the DEI committee really gets its arms around the Pillars document, and we get the budgeting done for DEI in Bristol, because that for the first time that's a budget item in our budget, is specifically to add to equity and to make ourselves more inclusive and hopefully leading to diversity. Let's see. To steal Alan's meme, it's a two-pronged approach, in my opinion. We won't get there if we only work on grassroots, and we won't get there if we only work on leadership. We have to do both. So we're going to work from the top down and the bottom up at the same time, because I know that people, women and people of color, will not join in great numbers until they see people like themselves in leadership, and otherwise we're just spinning our wheels. So we have great gender diversity in the staff and great gender diversity on the board, and the next thing on the horizon is ethnic diversity. So the sailor athlete quota increase, while laudable and is going to be really good for us from a governance standpoint, it slows that down a little bit, because now a third of the board seats go to athletes, and because we've been a white sport for so long, all the elite athletes are white. So that itself will take some time to.
Not all.
Not all. Okay. Augie Diaz is not Caucasian, so. That will require some patience. I'd say that for us to get to the point where we substantially better reflect the demographic of America is probably 10 to 20 year project. And I only have 3, but it's my job to try and set the things in place that'll make it easier for successors.
Thanks, Rich. Going to other ways of representation other than diversity. And one of the big pushes during your administration, Cory, was the inclusion of sailor athletes on committees and boards. And we have Bree, who's our board member and our sailor athlete representative. I'd love to hear from you, Bree, as to what your role is as a sailor athlete. And Cory, from your side, in terms of how U.S. Sailing is helping lead the charge from a USOPC perspective of inclusion of sailor athletes on committees and boards. We'll go with Bree first.
Okay. So I'm a sailor athlete elected director, which means that I'm elected by athletes to serve in this position. So what that means is basically I bring the voice of all of our athletes to the discussions that we have, and that's a big part of what the USOPC is looking to accomplish with their 33% congressional mandate. To give you an idea of how this plays out, we got the opportunity from the USOPC to redefine what it means to be an athlete. And our Sailor Athlete Council sat together and said, okay, who's at the table right now? Who do we have as athletes in our sport? And who should be at the table? Who's missing from the discussion? And we realized in that process that elite in sailing does not just mean Olympics. It means America's Cup. It means around the world sailors. It means including those members and all of you into having a position and a seat at this table. And so because of that discussion, we were able to improve the definition. We've gotten more offshore representation on our board. Justin Schaefer is now joining. He's not here today, but and Stan Honey. And so I think that's a really important part of what we do as the Sailor Athlete Council. And I encourage all of you who are committee leaders and stakeholders to have the same conversations with your committees and with yourself to say, okay, who's at my table? And more importantly, who should be here that's not here? And how can I invite them in here to get their perspective and to get their thought heard? And so that I'm hoping that's something that we can all do to help increase. I am clearly very passionate about D&I, but that's a really important thing that all of us can do to make steps forward. So not directly answering, I tangented, but there you go.
It's great. Love it. Cory.
Yes, and thanks for the question. Yes, our board is really proud of looking at what USOPC mandated as far as athlete representation on our board and accomplishing that actually a year in advance, but certainly with this new board, we have 5 athletes that have been elected by athletes who are on our board moving forward, and that's really exciting. And while some of our committees and people may think that, boy, that's kind of a burden and that's difficult to achieve, we embraced it. And it's been so rewarding for me to have all of the athletes on our board as part of our board and really included. And they come to the board, and once you're a board member, you don't just represent like this narrow constituency of Olympic athletes or your world of being an Olympic sailor. We say, look, you're a board member. You have to consider all of U.S. sailing. And all of a sudden, their eyes were wide open of all the parts of the sport that we serve. And they all came from our sport. So they get it. And they really get it. And it's just been awesome to have our athletes on our board. I mean, it has just inspired every other board member with their contributions, and they've really dug in. So I'd really like to thank and they tend to be younger than all of us sitting up here, so that really helps with diversity in terms of age. But also, I've just been amazed at the amount of volunteer give back time some of our young athletes have given us. So thank you, those who are hearing me, who are in that group, because it's just been really valuable to our board.
Thanks, Cory. You can keep that one. So I've got a question. I'm going to direct it at Paul. Cory, feel free to chime in, and anyone else as well. Has to do with parasailing and Paralympics, as we brought up very briefly in your presentation. It's a three-part question, so stay with me on it. The first part of the question is, what is U.S. sailing doing to get sailing back into the Paralympics? The second part of that question is, assuming sailing does get back into the Paralympics, will U.S. sailing treat the parasailors equally as other sailors regarding financial backing? And the third part of that question is, should sailing not get back into the Paralympics, will U.S. sailing support the sailors with disabilities with an annual team and financially supporting them to getting to World Championship sailing events? I know it's a lot to unpack, but
Well,
if anyone can
so
do it,
the
you
first, I think the first part of the question I answered pretty well in my talk. We're working hard with U.S. Sailing's working with World Sailing right now to lay the groundwork and the social movement to petition after January 1st. We can actually file a petition to the IPC to try to get para sailing back into the Paralympics for 2028 on our home turf in LA, which would be a fantastic cornerstone to what is going to be an amazing Olympic Games in the United States of America. So we're on that, as I said, and Betsy's kind of our leader of the group, but we're doing everything we can to augment that. As far as what we would do to support them, well, we would do the same as what we're doing with the entire Olympic team. Financial support, coaching support, logistic support. I personally don't know exactly what levels were done in the past and if it was similar to the Olympic levels, but in my mind and under my regime, it would be, there's no reason to be any different. And on a personal level, I am a supporter of Team Paradise, largely because Magnus Liljedahl is a guy I admire a lot and has crewed for me a lot in my star, and I think he's doing a yeoman's job down there in Miami at the Sailing Center with what he does for disabled veterans. And I think a lot of our Olympians trained on his equipment at his facility. So parasailing is something I'm fairly aware of. We also support, through America One Foundation, BADS, which is Bay Area Disabled Sailors. And obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I've been a board member of America One ever since I founded it. Yes, we would do, as U.S. Olympic Sailing, U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Sailing, we would support them to the same level as we support all the other team members. The third question was what?
If parasailing doesn't get back into the Paralympics, how does that affect the support of disabled sailors in getting to World Championships across the country or across the world?
Well, strictly, I would have to think about that and consider that. I think we're starting to make some budget available. Right now, parasailing is not an Olympic. It's not in the Paralympics, so it's not an Olympic discipline. But we are interested in keeping that community supported and going, and we will continue to do so until they get back into the Paralympics. I'm not sure if, strictly speaking, it's under my purview in the Olympic department to oversee that. I think that's something Alan and I and Betsy will have to discuss in the future. Right now, we're just focused on building the movement, building the support, and getting it back into the games. And as you all know, we have a great track record in winning medals in the Paralympics. So the United States of America, is pushing hard for this.
Thanks, Paul. Cory?
Yes, and again, I'm going to reference my World Sailing hat because one of my roles as a board member at World Sailing is I am the liaison on our board for the Parasailing Committee, and over the last number of years, Betsy has had the honor of chairing that committee. So we do have a close relationship with the world of parasailing due to Betsy, and I've attended every one of their monthly meetings, and so been very close to that effort. And so I've had a number of discussions with Alan and Rich and our board leadership about the importance of including a budget item, a budget line item in our ongoing budget for parasailing, and specifically supporting our representatives at the world level and making them included on our team. And even though we are, stretching our budget to do everything we want to do, that at least put a little spot in there that we will at least try to support these athletes who are representing Team USA, just like our Olympic athletes are, at the World Championships. And we have an opportunity, and World Sailing has looked at the sport the same way, that every 4 years, World Sailing runs a combined Sailing World Championship, and it happens to be next year at The Hague in the Netherlands. And during that event, there will be para events alongside the Olympic events. And so my point to our board and to Alan and to Paul, and Betsy's right alongside me, is that we, it would look really bad if we didn't support our para athletes and include them completely in everything we do. And it certainly wouldn't be our intention to do that. But the point is we just need to purposely think about it and start including them as soon as possible and think of them. But it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg because, as Paul said, he signed up to run our Olympic team, and right now para's not in the Olympics. But our point is, as an organization, we do need to support the top end of the disabled sport, the para side of the competitive side of our sport, as strongly as we can, and put it in our strategic priorities.
Thanks, Cory. Does anyone else on the panel have anything about this topic? Okay, great. So I'm going to switch a little bit of gears. Jill, this is for you. As the staff lead for the U.S. Sailing Foundation, and some people may not be as familiar with the U.S. Sailing Foundation. Could you give us a little background as to the role of the U.S. Sailing Foundation and progress that it's made in the past year or so?
Sure. Thank you, Josh. So the U.S. Sailing Foundation, our whole purpose is to raise and invest the funds necessary to transfer over to the U.S. Sailing Association to spend according to the donor's designation or where needed most. So that was the first part of your question. The second part of your question was, what have we done lately, I think? And so what I can tell you is, and you've heard some of this earlier today, we've focused on 3 key areas. The first area is the Siebel Sailors Program. And we have raised $5 million there, and we're working toward a $5 million match to turn that into $10 million and really expand and deepen that program. And the beauty of that is it really hits the core mission of expanding sailing across the country. I'd say our second area that I would like to talk about in the what have we done for you lately, or what have you done for us lately, is really Project Pinnacle and the work that Paul is leading for our Olympic team and our Olympic development programs. And there we've already raised $18 million. And we have a long way to go. We'd like to get to $75 million. And Paul walked us through those 10 core pillars earlier today. And that really is what those funds will be used for. And then I mentioned where needed most, but what I'd like to talk about is our endowment. We really have a long-term sustainability plan in mind, and what we'd like to do under Bill Rue's leadership in the foundation is raise $100 million that we can put into our endowment to keep us strong and sustainable into the future, and so that we can have conversations that don't start with, gee, we'd really like to, but we don't have the resources. So that we can have conversations that start with, what is it we need most to serve you best? And what resources do we already have set aside in order to do that? So I think that answers your question. All right.
Thank you, Jill. And if anyone has any questions here, please don't be shy. Feel free to raise your hand. But I don't have no lack of questions. We have plenty here. But please feel free to raise your hands. Oh, yes, Chris.
Quick question on the funds you were just speaking of. The 18, like for example, the 18 million that has been raised for Olympic sailing. Is that in a separate endowment that is designated for the future of Olympic sailing, or how does that work?
Well, my CFO's in the room, so she'll correct me if I misspeak, I hope. She's also the runner, and she's got the microphone. Okay. No pressure. Armed and ready. So the endowment policy of the foundation really allows us to pool all of our funds together so that they're invested for the highest value. So that way we can have great return. And Bill Rue was running through our investment committee yesterday, and I can tell you that we have very high-powered people who have been investing for their entire lives, and they work for the companies that you would want to have your money in. So we really have a tight policy there, and we have a committee that oversees and works regularly to make sure that that's well managed and that the spending that we have is appropriately allocated. To your specific question, do we separate the pieces? It's more of a fund accounting under GAAP so that we can pull out what's been designated by percentage for Olympics or for any other program. And then we can report back to the donors on exactly the impact that you have made through your endowment fund. That said, Heather, is there anything I said wrong that you'd like to correct or clarify?
I think you're a phenomenal student.
Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Jill. On the subject of money and funds, a question came in. I'm going to try to phrase it correctly, as it wasn't phrased exactly right on the questions, but I talked to the person who posed it. So the question goes along something like this in terms of the money incoming to U.S. Sailing, whether it be sponsorship or fundraising or other. How, in your beliefs as the staff, kind of, Alan, Jill, and Paul, your beliefs, your opinions in terms of how that money comes in, is it directly related to how it's allocated to programs and products, whether it's a donor who's donating specific programs, or a sponsor who wants activation of certain programs, or Olympics versus the association? How does that work in your mind? And Alan, knowing that you're only 6 months on the job, I know you have some opinions on it as well too. Paul, love to hear your opinions as well. But that was the question, basically, in a nutshell.
Sure, I'll answer, and it's not really an opinion. There are certain funds that are donor dedicated, and whether that comes through the foundation and they have chosen to dedicate their resources to the CEBL program, those monies will go to support the CEBL program. That's not an opinion. That's what they've required, and that's what we will honor. The exact same thing applies to Project Pinnacle. When a donor makes a donation to support the Olympics, that money comes into the organization, it goes through the association, and ultimately it goes to support the Olympics. Same with the USOPC funds. When that money comes in, that money is there to support the Olympics, and that goes out to the Olympics. When there are funds that are not specifically designated like that, and they come in, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's publications, whether it's courses, whether it's where needed most, as Jill talked about, those are funds that the association, through its budget process, decides how to allocate the resources to where, not to paraphrase, but where needed most. And that's part of the budget process. That's part of the budget that we put together that the board ultimately approves. And the question that I think you asked earlier in the day about how we prioritize the budget process, and the board's approval of that budget process is how that gets prioritized.
Anything to add, Jill or Paul?
Sure. I think that was really well said. And the only thing that I would add to that is that when one of the things Alan said earlier that I thought was really critically important is that not every program at U.S. Sailing is going to generate revenue, right? We're a charitable organization and we have a mission to deliver. And so when we look at funds that are, if they're fundraised and they're charitable, they're where needed most, but whatever the other way that they come in, we do as a group think about the mission and where those funds need to be best applied so that we can deliver on that mission. And I just wanted to add that point because you made it earlier today and I thought it was really important.
Yeah, and I'll just just to, so there's an example, our REACH program. It's an important thing that we do. And we have some corporate sponsorship. Rolex is wonderful to provide us some resources to do that. While I hope Rolex triples its contribution, in the unlikely event that Rolex decided not to do that program, that's still a program we're going to do. We may have to do less of it, but that's an important delivery that we have to provide to the sailing community. That's an important program that we have, and we can't not do it just because they've chosen not to do that, which, again, they have not said, and I hope they triple it, and we could do more. But so it's not like the dollars in have to exactly equal the dollars out. In an ideal world, we would raise substantially more sponsorship for a program that will allow us to do a lot of things, grow that program and support the programs that Jill's talking about that can't otherwise support themselves.
Can I add to that just for a second?
Get a microphone.
Hold on.
One of the things that I want to really highlight in this aspect of money management and how we spend things is Heather has been able to implement for the first time a real accounting system where we actually project where we're going to be at the end of the year. So we get line of sight if we're starting to go the wrong way or things are imbalanced so that we can make adjustments. And we've never been able to do that before. And that's significant. We're dramatically doing a tremendous job of managing the money that we have. The other thing is that I've been involved for 3 years, and we've never had anywhere near the returns that the investment committee has been able to pull off since they took over. It's been like night and day. So that in itself, and they've really focused on that. They got off to a slow start because we had to define what they wanted to do and everything else, but once they hit the ground, it's been, oh my gosh.
I just want to say that Alan's answer in the middle was very precise and accurate, and it's very important for the donors that we solicit for specific programs who commit their funds to go to those programs, that those donors know that we honor that commitment. It isn't that the money is somehow decided to go somewhere else. It goes to that program.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Switching gears a little bit, and I'm going to push this to Cory and Rich as the past leadership, current leadership, and maybe ask Alan to comment on it as well. But the question is, what is U.S. Sailing doing, and I'm going to say, or has been doing, to recruit women in leadership roles, both staff and volunteer, and to the woman in the most leadership role, or just past the most leadership role? I'll turn it to you.
Well, I'm actually really proud of what we have done and what we continue to do. We look at 2 women who are here who took on huge leadership roles over the last year. Our CFO, Heather Monison, and our Chief Development Officer, Jill Nosach, who are here. So those are 2 women in leadership positions. Let's call out Betsy, who's in the back of the room up here, leading all sorts of things in the adult world, and as well as being such a great spokesperson on the international stage. So we do have a lot of great role models as women. And, one of the things I'm especially proud of is whenever I take on a role, one of the first things I think about is, who's going to come after me? And who can I inspire next to get involved? And I'm really happy that I think I achieved that because we have a lot of young women on our board. And furthermore, just looking and trying to inspire more women to take on roles that I've taken on. And I think by our very presence and our encouraging, attitude towards them, I think that helps a lot. But on the other side is I always look at balance. We need a balance of everybody. We talk about inclusion, but just a good, healthy perspective of men, women, people who represent everything, including opinions that aren't, and thoughts that are really different from mine. I really welcome that. I think all of us welcome people challenging our thinking, and so that's the way I've led and looked at things. And I'm just really proud of the young women who are on the board behind me, who are coming up.
Thanks. That was great, Cory. And that's been a theme of Cory's leadership the entire 3 years that I've worked for her. And I'll take a different part of the question, which is, how do I view our current, status? I don't know at the moment because we've added so many people here in the recent weeks, but for longer than a couple of years, we've been a female majority staff in Bristol. So it's very diverse perspectives for the staff, and that's something I only had peripheral impact on myself, but I'm very proud of. As Cory said, we have great female leadership on the board, and I think it's the message to all the leaders in the sport that it isn't, we don't have women on the board to have women. We have women on the board because we need their perspective, and that goes for ethnicity, it goes for ability, it goes for LGBTQ. We get better at all of our efforts, diversity and sailing, if we have more diverse perspectives. And if it's all male on the board or all male in the yacht club leadership and the flags, then certain decisions are going to be made. And we all know in this room that you end up with a female flag in your yacht club, things start to get disrupted in a good way. So I'll stop rambling, get off the soapbox.
You mean things start to get done?
Yes, things start to get done.
Alan, go ahead.
So Cory and Rich said it perfectly. I won't repeat what they said. I guess I would just add two things, which is we did hire Renee as head of human resources. That was important to Heather before I started. She found Renee. Renee has played a significant role in our DEI efforts. She's wise beyond her years, she's aggressive beyond her years, and she's making a good difference beyond her years. And I think that'll pay dividends for the entire organization in general and from a DEI perspective going forward. I wish you were here to hear that. Hopefully someone's taping this and sharing it with her. And then second thing, which is indirectly related to your question, Cory mentioned Heather and Jill. Look, I'm sitting here 6 months in, and if it wasn't for Heather and Jill, I'm not sitting here 6 months in.
Thanks, guys. Bree, I'm going to ask you a question in regards to gender and just looking at a past 470 sailor yourself. Just love your thoughts and opinions on 470 going mixed gender for the next Olympics.
Okay, very great question. Thanks for that. I think that it's great that the 470 is staying an Olympic class. I think historically it has been a class in the Olympics for a long time. And I think that the NACRAs that have been mixed have been really great. As a sailor athlete and on the Sailor Athlete Council, we have a lot of relationships with athletes and they're enjoying that partnership. And so I think to see the 470 go mixed brings a great opportunity for men and women athletes to learn to work together and to broaden their skill in a different sense. So I'm excited to watch the racing. I'm excited to see the strategies that the countries use. It looks like most of the women will be helming. So exciting to cheer on my fellow competitors and friends and watching them sail. So that would be I'm all for it. I think it's great.
Thanks. Still, any other questions out here? Oh, great. Awesome.
Hi, what's the status and future plans for the REACH program?
Alan, you kind of touched on that earlier. Feel like expounding a little bit more?
Sure. So right now, we've just issued grants for the next round of community sailing schools to be part of it. So it's off and running. The leader of that program loves it, lives it, breathes it, wants it to grow, realizes its great attributes. And getting back to what we talked about before, all of us believe in that, and the more revenue we can generate from sponsorship or otherwise, the more we're able to grow that. So right now, it'll probably stay the same size for 2022 that it is in 2021. It'll be bigger in 2022 because it won't be as impacted by COVID the way 2021 did. But it's something that we're in love with, and will play a big part of our future.
Another question over here.
All day today, we haven't heard much about fleet racing, handicap racing with rating systems, alphabet soup, trying to figure out what number am I going to use today, what race is it in. I wonder if you could just address going forward what role you think U.S. Sailing needs to take or doesn't need to take to either smooth that out or just let it exist as it is.
Yep. So did I get that softball question? So this was a topic of vigorous conversation in Chicago with the Chicago Yacht Club leadership especially, and I'll just offer a couple of thoughts, and I know Alan has his own. We need to recognize in leadership in general that the number of people in PHRF, in addition to ORR or ORC and IRC, is one of the largest constituent groups of sailors in the entire country. So we've, I feel, had too much of an arm's length role there, leaving it to local PHRF committees to sort of do their thing. And as you guys know, sometimes it's a great committee and sometimes it's a committee that could use some improvement. So we have a solemn responsibility to provide leadership and best practices, training, seminars, guidance to local PHRF committees, more than anyone else, just from a numbers standpoint. 15,000 PHRF sailors out there, regular PHRF sailors. And then we've already talked about the wake-up call that we had about our sort of lack of bench in the offshore department. And what we learned was it's called offshore because that's a kind of a sexy title, but it's really about handicap management and level playing field. And Alan's one of the first things he did about something that he had to get skilled up on almost instantaneously was, 2.5x the size of the department. So he did that not in months, but in weeks after we realized the depth of the problem. So I'll stop there other than to say that, like a lot of things, it's a big train and it's moved in a certain direction for a long time. It'll take a while to slow it down and get it on another set of tracks, but that is going to happen. So if you'll be patient with us, I think you'll see some great things here in the coming months and years.
Sure, since you called on me, it'd be embarrassing not to.
Called you out.
I do think Rich said it well, and I really can't add to that. The only thing I will add is refer back to what I said when I talked earlier, which is, I guess, two things. One is the mission statement. What I noted was most interesting to me about it is it didn't call out any one particular part of the sailing community. So by definition, the part of the sailing community that you've identified is included in that. And if you take that to its next logical step, that fits perfectly within the question I answered before is how do we define success, which is serving all parts of the sailing community, serving all parts of the sailing community puzzle. So this is a piece of the puzzle where we are upgrading our rating services, our handicapping services to do things like this. And we don't have all the answers right now. Rich said be patient, but we understand what our obligation is, and we're certainly working towards that.
And I'll stay with you. Question is, very simply, are cruising sailors stakeholders in the new U.S. sailing?
Sure, they would be, if you think back to the puzzle, they would be part of the community sailing, for lack of a better place. Obviously, the puzzle sort of required us to, pick some titles and some headings that would incorporate a variety of things. So things like race admin was included in the competition place. It could have had its own, but it was included in there. Cruising is part of, the community sailing is our education. It's our training programs. And the cruising would absolutely be part of that. It's and I caught myself earlier. I don't know if people heard this, but sometimes I refer to this as a sport. In one of my first discussions with the group, I was lectured on that, which is stop saying it's a sport and it's a lifestyle and an activity. So I caught myself early if you heard me say sport, and then I went back to the words lifestyle and activities. And so it's absolutely part of our world, and it would be included in there in our minds.
Rich, your thoughts on that?
Right. So I started the cruising committee, 20 years ago. And I will be the first to admit that it was a swing and a miss. And I was just a little bit assumptive about what cruising sailors needed. I claim to be a lifelong cruising sailor myself. That's what I was raised in. I didn't start racing till I was an adult. There's 75 people in this room. That means there's at least 50 different definitions of what a cruising sailor is. And so it's a hard group to define. It's a hard group to capture. And what does it pride itself in most? Independence. It doesn't need race officials. It doesn't need a race course. It doesn't need mark set boats. People do it because they love the freedom. They don't want people telling them what to do or giving them advice or whatever. So they have a distinct set of needs that for us to serve them properly, we're going to have to do a lot more homework than we did 20 years ago when I thought starting a committee was all we needed to do.
I want to add to that a little bit, Josh, if I can. I obviously am in the racing world in a huge way, but I think sailing to me has been an amazing life experience. And I've shared that with my family, both racing with my kids to Hawaii, and I crew for my son on his Star now. But I've shared a lot of that cruising around the British Virgin Islands with my family and friends. And even when I talked to Culver, of course, I presented them with an Olympic flag and gave the motivational, inspirational speech, which I hope will make Sophie Dolan chase her dreams. But for all those along the way who've been exposed to our great sport, who choose not to race, who choose not to be in the competitive arena, sailing is a magnificent life experience. Being blown around by the wind, the adventure of it all, the self-confidence that it builds in an 8-year-old to think that they're actually going to be able, leaving the dock is one thing, getting back to the dock is another thing. And I think those are the things that actually captivated me as an 8-year-old. And so I'm making this statement because I probably represent the very competitive side of our sport, both in what I've done professionally for 35 years and what I'm doing now in my role with U.S. Sailing. But it isn't lost on me what a fantastic sport and life experience sailing can provide to families, to young people, to just about everybody who can have the fortune of being exposed to it. So I personally am going to be a big fan here at U.S. Sailing of us supporting and definitely considering cruising sailors as stakeholders and in a very, very important part of our sport that has so much to give and leave in your lifetime on this planet.
We shouldn't overlook the fact that U.S. Sailing has the best record in the world in boating safety, both in the development of boating safety and the spreading it around. And the cruisers in the United States have also gained and benefited tremendously from what we've done in the field of boating safety. The standards of boating safety by the Coast Guard are pretty much copied off of us. So that's something we should be real proud of.
And just following up on that, and Rich, I'm going to throw it to you. You know, kind of similar question to the DEI question I asked you before, but as you look forward towards your administration, what's the role of U.S. Sailing in regards to safety? What are the plans in regard to that, and the importance of it?
Well, that as regards the importance, you know, we're sailors, so of course safety is of no import to us. I mean, it just takes away from the excitement, right? When so I ran a school that taught sailing in one of the windiest spots in the country on a rocky leeward shore in the slot of San Francisco Bay. And so I would, you know, sit bolt upright in bed at 4 a.m, thinking about some aspect of my business that wasn't as safe as it should be. So I lived and breathed safety every day, preached it to my staff every day. Jim and I have both served on the FACA committee for the Coast Guard Boating Safety Office, and Jim is a legend there. In both ways, lots of acolytes and lots of people saying, "Duh, that damn Muldoon." So it has to be the blocking and tackling. You know, we were talking about, you know, shiny baubles and the fun things to do that Alan was talking about. Safety, you know, it's a stretch to call it one of those, but it's the critical underpinning. We don't have an organization if we're involving our kids, especially, but also our offshore sailors, to an unsafe sport. So I promise you that we'll only get better at that. I see our leadership there from an educational standpoint and an inspirational standpoint, and we'll keep it in front of all of you, and keep it top of our own minds, and make sure that our educational materials continue to emphasize safety first. I think if you look through any of our coaches' manuals or student books in the Keelboat program, you'll see safety woven through. Maybe it doesn't use those, you know, 6 letters, but everything is about making it as safe as possible, so as many people as possible not only enjoy the sport and be safe, but the sport's reputation is one of safety. So we're not going to attract people to the sport if they think it's dangerous. Same thing happened with scuba diving. Scuba diving, before it got nationally organized, was a tiny niche sport for masochists. And until they got together and said, we have to, A, train everybody, but B, show everybody and reassure everybody that the training's sufficient, we're not going to grow. Now they're like, you know, 50x the size of what they were before Patty and Nowie. So I think that's a good model for us, and it's one that we've tried to follow in the training and education department.
Thanks. So I'm being told I am getting overtime, but I'm going to ignore them because I really don't care. It's a good conversation. No, I'm kidding. We're going to do like one more question, but I'd love to. So this is kind of for Cory and Paul, I think. But feel free to chime in, panel, if you'd like to. The question is, what ideas do staff and board members have about improving the structure of elite youth racing as part of the path to the podium?
That's a great question, and one I'm really passionate about. And I think one of the most fundamental things is making sure our youth are inspired, get to see role models, get to try out different types of equipment, and really be inspired by great role models and great coaching. I'm a big proponent of investing in training our coaches so that we do have ways and for people who are really excited about next steps to get up the learning curve quickly and efficiently, and having fun with it, because there's so many fun things about the sport, and that we can help nurture the kids' dreams.
Thanks, Cory. Paul, anything to add?
Well, we just recently formed a youth Development Task Force. I'm probably not saying the name exactly right, but John Pierce is leading that for us. Fred Hagerdorn's on that. Cory is as well. And I agree with everything Cory said. I would just say that we need more clarity of the pathway for elite sailing. Exactly how do you make your way to our under 19 programs, then on to the Olympic development and onto the U.S. team. We do have some clarity on the website specifically about how to qualify for the U.S. sailing team, the tiering structure, but we can do more and do better. So more clarity, I would say more convergence rather than divergence. You know, in some ways there's too many things and it's kind of confusing, and it's better to have fewer events with 80 participants at them than half as many events with 30 participants. So, and then, you know, as you know, we're increasing the support. So more clarity, more convergence, and more support.
Thanks, Paul. So as we wrap up, I do want to go down the horn one more time and just, until the next time, everyone here, to everyone watching on the live stream, to everyone that rewatches this, just a last word going down the line here. Anything you'd like to tell the U.S. Sailing membership, the public, the general sailing public, and the stakeholders in this room? I'll start with Cory and go down the line.
Thanks, Josh. I'd just like to thank everybody in this room and everybody watching and everybody who's really supported me in my role. It's been really rewarding to be president of U.S. Sailing the last 3 years. So thank you, everybody. And I'll pass it on to Rich.
Thanks. So a couple things. First of all, I really see my presidency is an extension of Cory's. She and I very seldom finished conversations in disagreement. We look at the sport the same way and value the same things. And I also want to mention that I'm going to do what I think I'm best at, and that's going to be about organizational excellence and effectiveness. And that's going to be my focus as I guide the staff, those that let me. And also, I want to mention that the big initiative for me as part of that is called an initiative we started a while ago, staff-led, volunteer-supported. As many of you in this room know, especially Taryn and Matt and Bruce, we were a volunteer-led, staff-supported organization for decades, 100 years, really, if we want to count the USRU and NARU days. In this day and age, we've had to convert to a service organization and, of course, a governance organization. The old volunteer-led, staff-supported model was not working, and still in parts of our organization, it isn't working. So we're not going to flip that switch immediately, but you can expect to hear more about that from me, because I think our future is in having robust leadership in Bristol and allowing us volunteers to do the fun stuff, because for too long we've been doing the heavy lifting and trying to do it around kids and job and sailing, and that's been ineffective and also kind of painful for a lot of us. So more to follow on that. Oops, sorry.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you, Cory, I guess Rich and Alan, everybody, for including me in this discussion. It's an honor to serve U.S. Sailing, and it's an honor to be on this path of excellence with all of you in the room. I really believe that this is a joint effort, and we need everybody to help us get there. And so I want to just share a quick story. I'm getting my MBA, and 3 months ago, I had the opportunity to take classmates of mine sailing for the first time. I had classmates from Pakistan, Nigeria, Venezuela, Canada, Mexico, and the look on their face when they got to go sailing and experience what that meant was incredible. I had somebody come up to me and tell me that she journaled about it for 3 days because it was the best experience that she's had at Tuck. I don't know, I'm sure she's had great experiences. And for some people that don't get to see water, it is truly an amazing gift that we all have. And so I think sometimes when we sit in this room, we forget the impact that we can really have on others. And so I try to remember that, and I hope that all of you can remember that bringing somebody sailing can really, really impact their life. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you all.
So I would say you should be very proud of what Cory, Rich, Henry, Martine, John, the rest of the board took it upon themselves to do over the past year and a half. They didn't think that this organization was on the right path, and they did what they didn't have to do. It's a nonprofit volunteer board. They out of their conviction for what was right, their passion's an understatement for the sport of sailing. They took it upon themselves to shoulder the burden to make some very difficult changes and to go through very difficult times. That is not easy to do. They were volunteers. They chose to do it because they love this and they wanted to make a difference. So you should be proud of that. I think the next step with that is that they've made changes that they believe put us on a path to excellence. There is a amazingly passionate staff. There's an amazingly passionate volunteer base. I don't think I have to tell you all that since you make it up. We are doing the right things to get the house in order so that we can succeed in the future. So the future is bright. So you should be pleased about that.
And I'd like to say thank you. I want to say thank you because you've been sitting in this room all day long, and that's a lot to ask, and I appreciate that you're here. I want to say thank you to the folks who sent in questions ahead of time on your registration, to the folks who submitted questions on the chat if you've been listening and watching from the comfort of your home. I want to say thank you to the people who were brave enough to raise their hands and challenge us and question us on what we're doing and what we believe in, because it's all about you and what you want, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're listening. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, so appreciate your willingness to be here and help us be better. Because, as I said before, we wouldn't be anywhere without you. So I really, really appreciate that. And because I'm on the foundation side, I also want to thank everyone who supports us. Every single gift makes a difference. Every single gift makes an impact. And I think Bree said it best. We often forget, or at least I often forget, the gift that I have to live near the water, to be in the water, to be on the water, to be on my boat. And anything we can do to share that gift with people who don't have that opportunity is going to help change the world. Because we're not just making better sailors, we're making better people. Thank you.
I touched on it before. I think one of the most, well, probably the most precious thing in life is the future, because the future hasn't been spent, hasn't been consumed. It's a fresh canvas, and it's even more precious and special when the conditions are set for excellence. And I really feel that what we have around us, what we have with all of you in the room, what's our fan base and our supporters and our fellow sailors that are watching us on the stream, you know, I feel like we are positioned to win and succeed. And that doesn't mean necessarily winning races, but win in our sport and enjoying our sport to the fullest and making it accessible to everybody. So again, like I started, I'm super honored to be on the U.S. Sailing staff, and I wake up every day loving my job.
Thanks, everyone. Before we close out, I am going to hand it over to Rich for a second for some final words. Before I do so, Rich, I just want to make a couple of quick thank yous as well. Huge thank you to Connecticut Yacht Club for hosting us today. If everyone give Connecticut Yacht Club and their staff a round of applause. They are actually closed today, so they opened up just for us. Thank you, Connecticut Yacht Club. Big thank you to ATR Treehouse AV for setting us up with this great AV setup. And a big thank you to Deegan Media and his whole crew, and Dan Egan back there doing the live stream and being able to support us in this efforts to make sure this is streamed out. And it will be on the Starboard portal afterwards for playback. And we're going to work on getting little snippets of highlights and everything for you guys as well, too. But without further ado, current U.S. Sailing President, Rich Jepsen.
Thank you. So just to close, I want to thank you not only for everything you do for the sport, but for the time, the effort, the treasure you invested in getting here today to make a difference, to learn more about us, but more importantly, have an opportunity to hold us accountable for our promises. And the work that you do is critical, and we're a board of nothing without all of you. So thank you. I want to bring to your attention the follow-up plan for the rest of the questions, because there are still questions that we didn't get to, and we have inventory of them and are going to synthesize those, get answers to those questions, and get them out to all the attendees. Josh has some wild idea that we'll send it out to everybody in the organization. I don't know what he's thinking, but so we've been taking a lot of notes, obviously recorded the session. We're going to use all that to make sure that every single question gets answered to the questioner's satisfaction. And last item is just one, because I'm in charge of this organization now, I'm just going to take the opportunity to get really close to the bar. So I want to be first in line. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, Rich. Cash bar is open. Thank you, everyone, for watching us in the stream.